Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're breaking down a viral video that lays out what it calls a full-blown civil war brewing inside the Republican Party. It's a fight pitting Donald Trump's America First movement against an establishment he calls RINOs.
So the whole thing really centers on this call to action from Donald Trump. He's drawing a very clear line in the sand, framing a conflict between his America First agenda and the Republican officials he and his supporters have labeled RINOs.
Okay, first things first, we got to define that key term you're going to hear a lot. RINO, as you can see, stands for Republican in name only. In the video we're analyzing, it's a pretty pointed label for politicians who are seen as not just being too moderate, but as actively getting in the way of a more populist conservative agenda.
All right, here's our game plan to unpack all this. We're going to start by looking at the two key policy battles that are right at the heart of this fight. Then we'll dig into the procedural roadblocks that are getting in the way. And finally, we'll explore the extreme go-nuclear solutions being floated to just smash right through them. Okay, let's dive right in. The first major front in this war, at least according to the source material, is this big battle over appointing conservative judges and U.S. attorneys. So, the video we're looking at claims there's basically one single reason for what it calls a shortage of America First judges. And believe it or not, it all boils down to this little-known but super powerful Senate tradition. So, what in the world is this blue slip process? Well, it's basically this century-old senatorial courtesy. It works like this. When the president nominates someone for a federal job in a specific state, the two senators from that state get a literal piece of paper, a blue slip, to signal whether they approve or disapprove. So, here's the kicker and how this power really works in practice. According to the source, if just one of a state's two senators holds back their blue slip, well, the nomination is pretty much dead in the water. That gives a single person this immense veto power over the whole appointment. And we're not talking about a minor issue here. The video really drives this point home by showing that because 25 states have at least one Democratic senator, this process can be used to block appointments in, half the country. And to put some numbers on it, the video claims that in the last year alone, something like 50 of Trump's picks for judges and attorneys have been completely stopped in their tracks by this one procedure.
And to really hammer home just how big of a problem this is, the narrator throws out this statistic. 75%. That's how many U.S. judicial districts are supposedly missing an assistant U.S. attorney. And the video lays the blame for that right at the feet of this nomination blockade.
Now here's where it gets really interesting. It's where the video puts the responsibility. It doesn't point the finger at Democrats. No, it argues the power to end this whole thing lies with one single Republican, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Chuck Grassley, who they claim could just decide to abolish the blue slip tradition anytime he wants. To back this up, the source points to this post from activist Charlie Kirk. The argument is basically that what used to be a gentleman's agreement, just a simple courtesy, has now been turned into a political weapon by opponents, and that it's time for Republicans to just stop honoring it.
Okay, so that's the battle over judges. But that's just front number one. According to the source, the second major flashpoint in this whole internal conflict is the push for a national voter ID law, known as the SAVE Act.
And the way the video presents this is, not as some partisan squabble, but as a totally common sense policy. It points to polling data like this, which suggests, wow, that nearly 3/4 of Americans are actually on board with voter ID laws.
From there, the video really hones in on these 14 states that currently don't have voter ID laws. The narrator makes a point to stress that every single one of them is a so-called blue state, arguing that a federal law here would totally change the game for national elections.
So this raises a simple question, which the source asks directly. If voter ID is so popular, what's stopping it from becoming federal law? Well, the answer it gives is, you guessed it, another one of these Senate procedures.
And not big obstacle is the legislative filibuster. You've probably heard of it, but real quick, instead of needing a simple 50-vote majority, most big bills in the Senate have to get 60 votes to move forward. It's a rule that was meant to force compromise, but as you know, it's often blamed for creating total gridlock.
So this slide really breaks down the strategic choice that the video presents. You can keep the filibuster, where getting 60 votes is described as basically impossible, or you can go nuclear, get rid of the filibuster for this vote and pass the bill with just 50 votes, which the source presents as totally within reach. So the big question is, who's stopping them from going nuclear? Well, the source video doesn't pull any punches. It puts these 8 Republican senators on blast, explicitly naming them as the roadblock preventing the party from getting rid of the filibuster to pass the SAVE Act. So you've got these procedural roadblocks on one side and what the source calls internal opposition on the other. How do you break the logjam? Well, the video gets into some pretty aggressive, scorched earth tactics that are being thrown around to force the issue.
It really breaks down into three main ideas. First, you've got Donald Trump's call to just terminate the filibuster, period. Then, there's a threat from Representative Anna Paulina Luna to literally shut down the entire House of Representatives. And then finally, there's a pretty wild suggestion from the video's narrator that the president should just cut off all federal funding to the home states of any Republican senators who won't get in line and vote for the bill. So all of this, it's all building to the video's core argument, right? That this isn't just your typical political fight. It's being framed as a make-or-break moment for the country, and that sets up a really provocative final question.
So here's what it all boils down to. The source video makes the case that because, as it says, the fate of the republic is hanging in the balance, these extreme measures aren't just an option, they're a necessity. And it leaves us all with this really stark final question. In a political war this high stakes, where do you draw the line between just playing hardball and breaking the entire system? And more importantly, what happens when one side decides that line just doesn't exist anymore?